Hey, it's Kara, your host. I'm here today because I'm often asked, what should I read next? Or what is your all time favorite book? And that is why I created this list. This list isn't a declaration of the greatest books of all time. Rather, it's a collection of the stories I can't stop thinking about, the ones I've recommended more times than I can count, and that continue to live rent free in my head. Whether you're looking for your next unforgettable read, or just want to see what books have shaped my reading life, I hope this guide of 25 books inspires you to discover a new favorite. Head on over to the link in the show notes or to bookishflights.com/read/25 books. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. Today's episode is sponsored by Baker Bookhouse. Make sure you tune in to the end to hear their book flight of books featuring adventure, second chances, and new beginnings. In today's episode, I am chatting with Aime Austin. Aime was born in Brooklyn, New York, and graduated from Smith College and Cornell Law School. She is the author of the Casey Court and Nicole Long series of legal thrillers, and is the host of the podcast A Time to Thrill. Before writing full-time, Aime practiced family and criminal law in Cleveland, Ohio. When she's not writing crime fiction or interviewing brilliant creators, she's in a yoga pose, knitting, or reading. Aime currently splits her time between Los Angeles and Budapest. Welcome to the show, Aime.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you. Well, I feel like we are so much more than these bios, so can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
So as we were saying off mic, I'm a mom, but that's not my main role. Or maybe it is my main role. I have to think about
Yeah.
that. So basically, I'm from New York. I moved to Los Angeles about 25 years ago. I can't believe I've been
Wow.
here that long. I was going to be here for a minute. I was like, let me see what it's like. And I'm still seeing what it's like. I have been writing on and off from the beginning, actually, but I've have been writing full time for since 2008, so maybe 17 years.
Okay.
Um, and I do write two genres. Well, I used to. I used to write crime fiction, but I started writing romance.
Yeah.
And I wrote about 14 or 15 of those, and they sort of petered off, and I've sort of dedicated myself to crime fiction going forward.
Yeah. I listened to an episode of yours actually where you were talking about that crossover between where most authors start in romance, but then they switch over to like a crime fiction thriller genre. Can you explain that a
Mhm.
little bit and how that's such a consistent crossover there?
So I will say it's consistent for my generation. For newer authors, I don't know because the structure of publishing has changed so much.
Yeah.
But when I came through to the world starting publishing, it was still traditional publishing. Ebooks weren't yet a thing.
Yeah.
So publishing in any genre for women was more difficult than romance. Romance has a voracious readers. Publishers published back then, at least a lot of them. So
Yeah.
they would publish 100 to 200 a month, and
Wow.
they needed to, so each line, like it's like this line has five and this line has six and this line has four, and there's a lot of lines. And before the consolidation of publishing, there were quite a few publishers.
Sure.
So it was I don't want to say easy because that's not quite what I want to say, but it was an easier route to go if you wanted to be traditionally published. And many of us had read romance growing up. Everybody I know has like an aunt, mom, sister, somebody who had all those books in the room
The books
because
were
they're
cycling around.
and because they're short and because they were relatively inexpensive, like either yard sales, tag sales, garage sales, whatever you call them, often has a lot. Libraries had like the little spinning, at least where I was, a little spinning kiosk in the
Carousel thing,
front,
yeah.
yeah, in the front of romance. And then there are people's houses. So most people I know ended up reading quite a few of them. And then when you're thinking about writing a book, that's one of the things that comes to mind. But what's interesting is that when I've started doing the podcast and interviewing writers, I now learned that all of them made sort of the same decision. Like a lot of them had written fantasy or crime or I don't know the things I don't read, like sci-fi and
Sure.
fantasy. And they had wanted to write those, but being published and starting a career was sort of, I don't want to say at the forefront. And so they knew the thing that I knew is that writing and getting published in romance was going to be much more available because there were much more slots.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't like sorry, I can't think of the word, but it's hard to explain like how many romances were being published and those slots needed to be filled, and publishers were constantly looking to fill those slots. And also you could submit without an agent.
Okay.
So that
Yeah.
was very, very different. So being able to submit without an agent, work directly with editors was very different than the whole New York hustle, which you could do later once you had like
Sure.
publication credits. So you'd have like, I wrote 5 books or I wrote 10 books or whatever it is. And then when you get the agent or submit to a New York publisher, they take you more seriously.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Like they just like the accessibility maybe was a bit wider, a wider
A
of a
lot.
door to get your foot
Yeah.
in,
Put it in
and
here.
then yeah, and then go from there. Um, okay, so and then the other thing I've noticed, I've interviewed so many people that have been attorneys that have then turned to writers. Have you noticed that through your podcast?
So it's hard. Let me say this. Yes and no. So once almost everybody I've interviewed and almost all the writers I know had some other job
Yeah.
beforehand, and but really professionally educated jobs. So once we were at this retreat, there may be like 20 of us. This was 2019, I know, because it was the last place I went before COVID. It was like November of 2019. I
Before the
mean, and
world shut
then
down.
so I remember it was the second to last flight I took. But we were at this retreat and I knew like let's say 80% of the women, but before we started, I was like, can we go around and talk about people's jobs beforehand? So in that group, and I'm thinking some of them, okay, there's my friend who's an attorney. One, she was, they don't actually, most of them don't do these jobs. She was a psychologist,
Okay.
um, airline pilot. She is actually about to retire. Archaeologist, doctors,
Wow.
2 epidemiologists, which obviously came into right after that. I was like, oh, I guess I know who I'm calling.
Yeah.
But
You're
it
busy
was sort
now.
of, I know exactly. But it was that group of people. And one of the main reasons they quit, and this is probably a uniquely American problem, is that it was very difficult to maintain those kinds of high level jobs and have children. So
Yeah.
especially 2 or 3 different scientists I've talked to, and I have a friend who's a scientist who has no children, so she's still doing it. But being in a lab like 24 hours or running to get your experiments is not compatible with small children,
Yeah.
in the landscape where we live. Not, I mean, maybe in other countries where they have different sort of childcare models. So a lot of people quit to take care of kids, but the brain didn't fall out of their head.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I still need to
and
use it.
and so there was a lot of, from what I've talked to people about, there was a lot of, okay, oh my gosh, I have these little children at home and I'm reading a lot, and why won't I try writing? And that's the story of a lot of the authors I know. So 95% of the people I know were professionals with like a lot of them with PhDs, masters, JDs, or MDs. And then that shift came with children.
Yeah. That resonates with me so much because I fell into the same pattern myself. You know, I'm a physical therapist by trade.
Mhm.
We moved overseas. My husband's in the military, so we did a military assignment in Sicily. And we knew I wasn't going to be able to work, but once I stopped working, it was like, well, I still need to use my brain. It was like this itch of like I have to be more than just mom in a day.
Mhm.
Like that just wasn't filling my cup, And so
Mhm.
I started reading and then ended up in the world of podcasting because I wanted something to be creative with and have goals for. And I think,
Right.
very similarly maybe to writers or just
Mhm.
feeling that itch, like I need more.
That's the
Yeah.
huge catalyst for almost everyone I talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing because I think I've said it quite a bit on the show. It's like what I thought I would be at 18 or what I thought I'd be at 25. And it's just like, I am nowhere near what I thought that would be. And it's just how these life changes and life happens. And then you just have to recalibrate. And I'm totally somewhere different than I ever thought I would be at that age.
I think so as well. Although my little self would be excited about the author part. And I would be like, so did I not go to graduate school? I would have been like, no, no, you went, but you let that go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about your writing. Let's talk about your thrillers and tell us
Mhm.
about them.
Okay, so I'm from New York, but after law school, I was married and I followed my now ex-husband to Cleveland. He got a job there.
Okay.
Um, it was a clerkship. They're like temporary jobs or 1 or 2 year jobs. So this wasn't like going to be a lifetime move. No offense to the Midwest, but I'm not that person. And I still, I'm sorry, I just watched Love is Blind and people, and I was like, oh, Midwest, nice. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm from Chicago.
it was interesting. I'll say that. So I moved there, but knowing it wasn't going to be forever.
Yeah.
And I, I had reluctantly gone to law school. There's a lot of family pressure. Like the people of my parents' generation, a lot of them went to college, took time off, and then went to graduate school and had felt that they had wasted time. I don't know if I believe this now, like that's their thing, but they certainly
Yeah.
like put that on us. So it was like, well, if I had to do this all over again, I would have gone directly after school because I wasted so much time not establishing my career.
Yep.
And I obviously at like 17, 21 did not have any perspective. So, I was like, well, if I just go to graduate school, I'll get them off my back. And that's what I did. But I'm not one of those people who's like, I've always wanted to be a lawyer. Like I really
Sure.
like, no offense to the job. Like I find it like it's very boring and not that interesting and kind of unfair and it has a lot of issues. So I practiced not only, okay, so I got there and was unclear as to what I should do. So I was writing and I was doing a lot of freelance writing gigs for
Sure.
like for newspapers. There was like a regional newspaper at the time, as well as a plain dealer. It's all one owner now, but
Okay.
but it was more than one owner back then. And I was doing that, and I was like, okay. And then both my ex and my mother were like, well, why aren't you practicing? And I'm like, remember the promise? I was going to go to graduate school and then you
And
weren't
that
going
was
to hear from me
it.
again.
Yeah.
But they were both like, well, how do you know you're not going to like it? And I was like, all right. So I tried it. So I did the thing that Casey did, not for the reasons that she did. She did it because
Sure.
she had no other choice. But I hung out a shingle and I was like, well, what am I going to practice? I was not interested in business or any of those things. So I was like, I'll do family and criminal law because at least the cases are interesting, which is true. But I will say it's highly stressful.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to exaggerate my own sense of importance, but sort of standing there between the jury and jail is a lot. It was a
Yeah.
lot. I don't know how people do it, but I was like, I'm not going down because I'm like, I could see the lawyers who were drinking all the time and doing it. I was like, I can't go down like this. So all that said, I quit it. But when I quit it, I still wanted to write. And I was like, oh, I've always wanted to write a book, which by the way is very hard the first time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'll write about this and I'll integrate like all these like life experiences I've had and create this character and write this one book. That was the plan. I'm going to write this one book. And so that's how it started. So the protagonist of the main series, although she's in mainly, I think, all the books, is Casey Court. She hangs out a shingle and then is confronted with family and criminal law in Cleveland, Ohio, and all of the problems therein, the stress, the low
Yeah.
pay, the corruption. Those are the main three
Yeah.
issues.
Well, and look at that. It gave you a chance to, you're still exploring all of it, just in a much different capacity than you thought you would be, or to your family's chagrin of like what they thought you would be doing.
No, and I do think about that. Like I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, well, I guess what I got out of this was a different career, but certainly not the career that anybody would have expected.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what have you learned about yourself through writing?
Oh, that I have greater perseverance than I thought. I mean, that first book, it took years. It was bad. It took years. And then I quit working on the book, to be honest, and started writing romance because I was like, clearly, this is not for me.
Yeah.
Let me. And I've read way more romances than I've read crime fiction. I was like, well, maybe I need to pivot to the other thing. And then I got published, and sort of that road sort of started. But after maybe the third or fourth book being published in romance, I was like, okay, so I can write a book, and get it published. Let me go back to this. So it was sort of that perseverance because I started writing the first Casey Court book maybe 30 years ago.
Wow.
30, 28, let's say 28,
Yeah.
something like that. So that's, yeah.
Wow. Well, someone picks up one of your Casey Court books. What's your wish for them? What do you hope they'll take away from the series?
Now, that's a good question. I think what I would have thought back then would have been different. I think the first book was published maybe like, let's say 11 years ago. That's probably about right.
Okay.
But what I think I'd want them to take away is I don't want to sound like an after school special or like I'm moralizing or like there's a lesson in this, but I do spend time talking about corruption and that the way that things work appear to work on the surface is not how it always works.
Yeah.
So like one of the things I talk about in one of the books and I have a lot of feelings about is like international adoption. And actually, since I've written that book, a lot of countries have closed international adoption for the reasons
Yeah.
that came up in the book. But one of the things that sort of plagued me, and this is maybe during the 90s, early 2000s, is that a lot of children who were being adopted were not actually adoptable. And I read
Okay.
this one article, like there's always a trigger. I still have the article. I think it was in the LA
Uh,
Times, probably like, let's say early 2000s. And they were interviewing parents in China who had left their children in an orphanage to seek work, get food. I mean, to like deal with some basic, like
yeah.
fundamental life issues. And when they came back, their children were gone and had been adopted
Yeah.
to another country, mostly the US. And I was reading these stories of these women, and it was just so tragic. I just couldn't imagine like I dropped my child off for safekeeping
Yeah.
because I was like having awful life circumstances, only to come back and find out, at least for me, he wasn't there.
Yeah.
Um, and so that sort of triggered it, but that's like one injustice. And so I wrote a
Sure.
book called Kidnapped about that. But there are many other injustices, whether it's foster care, the criminal system overall, judges who engage in corruption, and like, but these are all like sparked by true stories. Like there was a judge in Ohio who was sexually assaulting litigants and they didn't have because he was the judge on their case and
Yeah.
because he determined whether or not they could get their children back, they didn't feel like they had a choice.
Yeah.
So I do want readers to know that, look, I mean, I think a lot of people think the justice system is not necessarily fair, but I just want to talk about some of these really underlying issues that touch on like some really fundamental unfairness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like you said, the people like that, and again, probably me too, like I have this superficial knowledge, but I would probably be shocked to learn the depth of corruption that is
Mhm.
is there.
It was let me say this. So I moved to Cleveland, like I just out of, just as a new person, I knew
Yeah.
nothing about the city. And I was walking around or practicing, and I was like, there's a lot of corruption here and here and here. And everybody was walking around as if it was Tuesday. But I will say this. And so after I left, there was like a huge sting, and a lot of people went to prison because of the corruption. So I feel a
Yeah.
little bit justified because I'm like, you're standing and you're looking around, you're like, this is corrupt. And people are like, okay. And they're just like moving along as
Yeah.
if nothing were
Head
happening.
down. Put my head
Head
down.
down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I remembered my question now about
Okay.
so
Yeah.
after you had published, you said it was four novels, and then you went
Mhm.
back to Casey Court. Do you think your confidence had increased too? Because you're like, well, I have now published four novels. Or is it like I've had authors say, like, every novel is just as hard to write as the first one?
Yes and no. My confidence increased because I knew I could finish a
Sure.
book. Like clearly in the beginning, I was like, I have written like 80,000 words of crap. And like it doesn't hang together. It doesn't tell the story. Like in your head, you have this beautiful, beautiful story. And then you
Yeah.
look down and it's just a mess. So my confidence had increased that I could finish a book. My confidence around telling stories in the crime fiction genre, that came later
Yeah.
because I wrote one and then the second one I wrote when my son was born. So 6, 7 years later, and I was like, okay, let me get back to this and see if I can do it.
Yeah.
And it was hard. I mean,
Yeah.
it was hard, especially with the gap and the fact that it was like a series and I didn't know the characters as well as I do now. So it's not easy, but I know that if I start, I can finish.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Well, was there a book you read that made you want to become a writer?
So many. I mean, so I come from, I mean, well, many people in my family have aged. So there's that, or have died. So I'm an only child of only children. So we're not talking like vast numbers of people.
Sure.
But everybody in my family read a lot. And as an only child, like I didn't have kids to play with and nobody was entertaining me. So,
I'm an only child as well, so I understand.
like, so, and I was not, I'd wander around like in their houses and look like everybody, well, this is like a New York City thing, but a lot of people in New York City I know have like a library or like a room with a lot of books. I think it's the hugest fire hazard New York City has. I mean, it's just buildings and buildings of people with tons and tons of books and dust.
Yeah,
That said, but I did wander around like my grandmother's house, and one of my grandmothers read romance, which is how I picked up that first book. And then my other grandmother read popular fiction.
okay,
So, but like whatever's like the book of the moment. So like
sure.
Rosemary's Baby or like all of those kinds of things. And so I read a lot of those. I don't know. It's so interesting. I'm not sure if any of them inspired me. Like there are authors that inspire me to tell stories in certain ways,
Sure.
but overall, it was just lots and lots of books. Plus, I used to go to the Brooklyn Public Library, and
Amazing.
so I read a lot.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense being an only child and filling in our time because I've been there myself. So,
Had a lot of
well,
time.
we've already kind of switched gears a little bit to who you are as a reader. What genres do you read today?
I still read everything. I
Okay.
would like to, well, no, I'm sorry. I don't read horror, I don't read fantasy, and I don't read sci-fi. Beyond that, I'm not actually picky at all.
Mhm.
And I still read about 50% nonfiction and 50% fiction. I have this belief, and actually I think it's been borne out, so I'm good with it, that like almost every answer can be found in a book.
Yeah.
And so, at least in the nonfiction I have read in the last 5 or 6 years, like any question that I've had has been answered to such a degree that I'm like, oh, the information's already out there. So it's just a matter of like people knowing
Finding
it,
it. Yeah.
finding it. But I spend a lot of time seeking out answers to questions that sort of interest me, maybe not interest everybody else. But I was like, oh, there's answers.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for the answer to like a new question.
Yeah, I also believe that books come into our life when we most need them. So whether that's to fill whether that's like an emotional or mental thing you're experiencing, I think that I've found so many times that this book will tell a story and it'll just kind of fill that little gap that I needed
Mhm.
or just to give me some peace about whatever issue is going on at the time. And so I think, when you said answers, I thought you might say that, but I totally believe in this like book serendipity that it comes into your life when you most need it. So then whether that's answers in a nonfiction book or, for whatever turmoil you might be dealing with at the
Eh,
time.
mhm. I couldn't agree more. Like I just like there's so many books that have come in, especially in the last 5 years. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
That was like a therapy session in itself. So thank you.
Mhm. Thank you.
Well, how in your busyness do you find time to read?
So I feel like I have a lot more time than most people. So especially as my son gets older,
Sure.
he is at school more like elementary, like 2:20. I was out the door to
Yeah.
get him at 3:10 or whatever the weird time is. Um, Now he takes the bus actually to and from school. So I'm going to be honest, like he started a different in LA, it's like K6 and then 7 through 12. So when he started a new seventh grade, like, and he left here at like 7 in the morning, I actually sat here and I thought, oh, I've got like 2 hours to fill. Like it was just the
Yeah.
bizarrest feeling. Now I don't have a problem filling it. So, but writing takes less time. The actual act of actually getting words down does not take a lot of time. The thinking of what the words are going to be sucks up
Sure.
all the time. But I can do that and cook or like prep food and things like that or clean or whatever. And then the rest of the time I read. So I read it's just the rest of the time.
Yeah, that's great. I just didn't know if being a writer too, because I'm not one myself, if you get kind of burnt out from words at some point or
I sometimes, but mainly the genre that you're writing.
okay.
So like I like when I'm writing romance. And actually, I've been reading a lot less romance lately because it hasn't been serving whatever I used to get from it. I'm not getting anymore.
Sure.
I could probably explore that in therapy, but I haven't. Well, it's not like a priority.
Yeah.
No offense to that, because there's plenty of books in the world. Um, so I do it. I used to fill the gaps around, like the empty spaces. So if I have nothing to do for like 10 minutes, I'll read.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great little discipline there. Not picking up the phone, actually picking up a book or, not filling it with other time. So that's
Mhm.
fantastic. Well, you have been so gracious to bring a book flight with you today. Can you tell us about how you chose these books?
So, so I went back and forth because my like listening to like episodes of your podcast, people were really like either their book flight was fiction or nonfiction. And I was like, I need to mix.
You could
I
have. I'm
was
sorry. I could have
I
told
was
you that.
like, I was like, oh, this is too much of a box for me. So I will say this. What I included in the flight is what I'm thinking about now or around this book topic. So when I'm writing a book, I sort of go down a little rabbit hole of a theme.
Sure.
And that's where I am with this one. Sorry, I have to look down because I don't.
Yeah, you're all
Um,
good.
okay, so the books I included, the first one is my own because that's where the not the catalyst, but that's sort of where all of this comes together. And that
Absolutely.
book is called like His Last Mistress. And it's a book, well, it is what it is, about a woman who is having an affair and sort of the ripple effects from it in this little world that I've created, this little Cleveland East Side, it's the east side of Cleveland world. But also I've included in that another book called it's sorry, I have to because the title is forever.
Yeah.
If it's okay, here's the title. If he's so great, why do I feel so bad?
Yeah.
Um, and that's a book about like the subtleties of abuse, which is touched upon in this book. And then the last one is Leave a Cheater, Gain a Life. So here's what happened. I was writing, here's what happened. Here's how this happened. I decided to write this book. And this character, her name is Lulu Mueller, has sort of been having this affair, let's say across a number of books. It's not the feature of any book, but she's the best friend
Sure.
of Casey Court. So
Okay.
it started in a book called Reunited. And Casey, this is about Casey and a like international adoption and dealing with her dad's secrets. But so that started there, but Lulu had kept it a secret because it's the thing you keep a secret.
Yeah.
But when I got to this book, I was obviously she's the one of the main characters, and I was going to talk about it. I realized I had not ever thought about adultery or cheating or infidelity, like in any I hate to say it's just not a thing that had crossed my radar. Like it's
Yeah.
not an issue in my family, it was not an issue in my marriage. It was just never something I thought about. So I had like a really sort of surface thought, like of watching, like, let's say an episode of Oprah or some,
Yeah.
and then they talk about it and you're like, oh, okay. And then you're like, I'm gonna go make chicken now. Um, but when I was writing it, I started reading about infidelity and I had not, oh, I sort of feel bad because I was very like glib about it. And I don't think I actually know anybody where infidelity was an issue that I know of.
Yeah.
So it's not as if I was glib about somebody's personal issues, but I hadn't realized the depth to which, well, two things. One, we judge the women. So in the book and in a lot of the literature, things I've read about it, it's a man who cheats on his wife and then with another woman. So we spend a lot of time, at least from what I read, from my reading, blaming the other woman, the home wrecker, whatever you want to call her,
Sure.
or blaming the wife for not meeting her husband's needs. And I was like, how is this that we're blaming two people?
Yeah.
I'm not saying who have no fault, but we're not dealing with the complicit person who made a decision to go outside of their marriage. And
Yeah.
then I started reading more and more about it. And the Leave a Cheater, Gain a Life, the author is a woman named Tracy Shorn. And I came to it, I think I was Googling one day, like infidelity. And she has a blog that's been very popular for the last 10 to 15 years, probably, about that called Chump Lady. But she
Okay.
talks about she calls it the reconciliation industrial complex. And I had never thought about this, but there's a theme, I guess, and maybe in the US, I have no idea about the rest of the world, where people are like, okay, so we're going to reconcile and we're going to figure out what you did wrong to make the other person cheat. And there's not a lot of holding to account the person who makes a decision to go outside of their marriage.
Yeah.
And sure, maybe their needs weren't met. I mean, I'm not saying that, but there's many things they can do other than cheat, like have a conversation,
Yeah.
file a divorce. I mean, there's a lot of other actions you can take that don't involve adultery. But, and at that time, actually, I met a serial adulterer, and the level of, what is the word I want? The level of entitlement, I think, that cheaters have is something so beyond anything I ever thought. Like,
Yeah.
I just never thought about it, but it's like I was talking to the serial cheater and he's like, well, she didn't meet my needs, or she had two kids and wasn't paying attention to me, or she had a
Yeah.
sick parent and wasn't paying attention
Someone
to me.
else's problem.
And mind blowing. Like I was just like,
Yeah.
wow, okay. But that really is it for a good 6 months. This is literally all I thought about.
Yeah.
And I had just A, never thought about it, and B, was slightly horrified about a lot of the languaging and mainly the languaging around it and the placing of blame.
Yeah. Absolutely. It makes me think about too that like never taking that personal accountability for yourself, right? Because you're ultimately the cheater is at the crossroads of like, I'm going to make this decision that isn't best for my marriage. Like, it doesn't
Hmm.
matter what the other person has done or not. Like, you took the step and went that way,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so why is that language blaming the woman, right? On both
Hmm.
sides of the aisle, like you were
Right.
saying. It's just
It's
wild to think about.
it's wild. I'm not mad at myself. It's just I had never thought about it. And then you delve into this world and you're like, oh my gosh, this is wild.
Yeah.
This is wild. This is wild. And the thing I think that I find interesting about Tracy Shorner, she talks about it and frames it in a way that sort of characterizes it as abuse, and not because, well, A, because there's lying, there's manipulation, but also there's like subjecting your spouse to like, sexually transmitted diseases
Hmm.
and all, and you're just like, or the potential for having a pregnancy with somebody outside of the marriage, and the level of like lying, manipulation, and gaslighting that has to go on, because 95% of the people, like I listened to so many podcasts driving around
Yeah.
LA about it, and every person who'd been cheating on had this story where they figured it out, whether it was like the gut feeling or finding evidence on the phone or whatever it was. And they confronted the cheater, and 95 to 99% of the time, the cheater was like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's not happening. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, so then of course the person is like spinning out because they're like, I believe this is
Am,
happening, but you're
am
telling
I
me it's not,
crazy?
am I
Yeah.
crazy? And
Yeah.
that's really unkind, and like low level abusive, because you're just really like lying and gaslighting someone to
Yeah.
protect yourself for no good reason. I'm not sure. I haven't figured out that's the part actually I haven't figured out, and I'll think about some more, is why would they lie? Like if they've made like this really deliberate choice, then why are they lying about it? Like own up to it
Like
and
they're
then
afraid to lose
live with
what
the
they had
consequences.
that they've already stepped out on. So,
Well, I think that's the conclusion a lot of people have come to.
yeah.
She calls it cake eaters, like they want the cake and eat it too. And
Yeah.
they want to have the family, and whether that's not getting divorced, the instability, losing the access to their children all of the time, money, social status, what they don't want to lose any of that, but they also still want the other thing.
Yeah.
And that's not fair.
Yeah. There's something that it was not in this instance, but I came across, I was reading something and it talked about when you just cannot understand the other person's behavior, to just take a step back and just think like, how lucky are we that we don't understand someone that acts that way, right? And it's like just stuck with me since I read this article, and I think it was more related to something with friendship. I forget why. I mean, a couple years ago, and it's just stuck with me of like, it's okay that I can't possibly fathom how that person would do that to someone else, and I could be okay with
Mhm.
that. I can sit here and spin around and try to figure it out, but maybe it's okay that I don't.
No, and I think this is the thing I actually love about podcasting, but I had an interview with somebody And that was the gist of what she said. She was like, but if you're not a sociopath or you're not a psychopath or you're not a narcissist or you're not like one of these people, it's okay that you don't understand that
Yeah.
because you don't need to be like, and I was like, got it,
Yeah.
got it. Because I'm like down the rabbit hole going, but I was like, but you could just have a conversation. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to have every hard conversation in the world, but I would never do that. So I just couldn't like
Yeah.
wrap my head around it.
But I understand from the sense of being an author too, is you have to like kind of understand your characters to be able to write them. So I can see where you end up down these rabbit holes of like, well, I'm trying to understand so I can, accurately write or portray this character and their
Mhm.
emotions and their motives and all of that. I can see where as a writer, you need to understand it to put it down on paper.
But I think when I came to entitlement, I was like, oh, got it. It's not as deep as I thought. I'm like, I got to be at the deep end. And they're like, no, this is the shallow end of the pool, honey.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for bringing those books with you today. How I'd love to end our show here is with our bonus pairings, and they're just a speed round of questions you can answer really quick. Are
Okay.
you a rereader?
No, no, no. I don't go to the library as much as I used to, and LA has like 50 branches, so it's not the same. But when I was a child at the Brooklyn Public Library, there's just racks and racks and racks of books. And if I can read another one, I don't need to
Yeah,
read any of the other ones ever again.
yeah.
There's a
Too,
new story out there.
there's too little time. I feel you on that one. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
That's a good question. There's an author, she writes nonfiction, whose name is Brianna Wiest. She's one of these people who's like 25 and brilliant. It just startles me because she seems to have a level of emotional maturity that I never had at 25. But there was one book called, it's a book of essays. It's called 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think.
Okay.
And I was I was driving somewhere in LA that I knew was gonna I was driving at rush hour to a friend's gallery opening in the South Bay, which is just like it's like 30 miles, but literally an hour and a half of my life.
Yeah.
And I was flipping through the audiobooks and I put it on and I was like, oh my God, it changed. Like it literally changed the way I think. It's just essays about very sort of discrete things in your life that you should look at a different way. Like one of them was not telling stories to yourself. So like, saying somebody doesn't call you back and then you go
Yeah.
through this spin out like I must
Yep.
have insulted them or whatever. And she was like, don't make up stories. And I was like, oh my God, you've just saved me like hours of lifetime. Because
Yeah.
now if people
Being
don't
an
call me back,
overthinker.
I don't think anything about it. And I was like, so, but it's 101 basically discrete issues like that it helped me like stop ruminating about things that were not my problem.
Yeah. Oh, sounds like I need to add that to my list. Thank you. Where is your favorite place to read?
Um, so I don't read in any one place. I had to think, my son makes fun of me. I read in between all the times of not doing something else.
Yeah.
So I read standing in the kitchen waiting for food to cook. You could just flip on the Kindle. My
Yep.
iPad looks disgusting. I borrow books from the library in Kindle and audio simultaneously. So today I'm reading a book and I had to leave my house to go to Salvation Army and run some errands.
Sure.
And I found the place on Libby and I listened to it. And then I came back and then picked it up to read it. I read on airplanes, that's for sure, because I take a lot of long flights,
Yeah.
but I read everywhere. I don't have like when I was really young, I used to sit in a chair and read, but now I just read in between everything else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
wherever I
Life is
am.
pulling you in other ways, so you got to fit it in the cracks. So, lastly, what are you reading next?
Next. That's a good question. It's a book called The Midnight Library.
Oh, yeah.
Um, have
Yep.
you read it?
I have. It's
Oh,
such a unique premise of a book. I think you'll enjoy it.
so somebody suggested it to me, let's say a week ago or something, and I finally got both the ebook and whatever, the audio from the library this week. And I'm like, the premise, there's like a Twilight Zone episode where you go into a library and it has like the books are being written as you're living them. And I was like, oh, you've just hooked into like something I fundamentally think so much about. I think, what if there's like a library where the books are being written about your life and then you could change things? And I was like, and then the person recommended it's like also about regrets. I was like, oh, you've hooked into all my feelings.
Yeah. And I think going into that will help because I'm not one that usually reads a lot in the background, like, or, to kind of give myself a heads up. And I was kind of confused at first when I started this book, but you already have a good basis of what it's going to be. So I think that will help you a lot, because it definitely took me a little bit to get into it, because I'm like, wait, what is happening here?
No, so I never read ahead, but when I get recommendations, of course, they come with information. I don't read the back of books, and I don't
Yeah.
read any synopses. So I just walk in cold because I want somebody to tell me a story.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I try to do, because then I feel like sometimes you get hit with a spoiler and you're like, oh, I didn't want that. So
Yeah,
I try
so
to go
I
in blind when possible.
absolutely 100% like everything should go in blind. Every book, I'm just like, let's see.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'd love to discuss books and reading. I could do it forever.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Aime Austin, including her book flight that helped her research His Last Mistress. You can find all the books that we talked about on the show at bookishflights.com. And now for a message from our sponsor, Baker Bookhouse. From birdwatching in Tennessee to trekking across the country on a bookish road trip to managing a family ranch, these literary treasures are brimming with adventure, second chances, and new beginnings. Here's a bit about each book before you order your next read from bakerbookhouse.com for 30% off plus free shipping. In the Bitter End Birding Society by Amanda Cox, hometown hero Anna Lee Watkins ventures to Bitter End, Tennessee to help her great aunt get her house ready to sell. But when a ragtag group of amateur birdwatchers take her under their wing, she discovers long-buried family history that puts her hope for new beginnings to the test. This book also happens to be our Meet the Author Book Club pick for October, so join us to meet Amanda. You can find all the information on the website. The next book is in the Atlas of Untold Stories by Sarah Brunsfold. Two sisters who couldn't be more different and their ever-practical mother set off on the literary road trip of a lifetime, inspired by their favorite books and the lives of the authors. They begin to discover that for all the stories between them, the best ones are yet to be written. In the last book, When the Road Comes Around by Katie Powner, Tad Bungley has a reputation for trouble, but Anita Wilson believes that all Tad needs is a chance. So she convinces her husband to offer Tad a job at the ranch. She didn't anticipate the effect Tad would have on her disabled son, and together Anita and Tad must learn when to hold on, when to let go, and how to embrace grace. Get all of these books for 30% off and free shipping through bakerbookhouse.com today. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.